You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, People Centric leaders. Welcome back to this episode of the People Centric Podcast. This is Stephanie Anderson, and today I am joined by Diana Royalty and Philip Herzog. So say hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, people-centric people.
Well, today we're going to talk about something that nobody ever has any problem with. No one ever talks about this in their business, and it's never a reason that anyone hires us. And if you can't sense the sarcasm in my voice already, here's what it is. We're going to talk about communication. And Diana and Philip can disagree with me, but I'm going to make a bold statement and say that every single company we have ever worked with has said their communication needs to be improved and or could be better than it is. We've never worked with an organization that was just like, you know what, people-centric, we don't need your help on communication. We've got that all figured out. Do we agree?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this a while, and I literally cannot think of a single organization who was like, we have great communication. Zero.
Yeah. And I would say every once in a while, we do get a little lip service on that front. They're like, oh, it's great. We're fine. And then we start working together, and then our team is struggling to communicate. And that's always a flag for me. Like if our team is like having trouble communicating with you, then your communication system may not be as strong as you thought it was.
Yeah.
You just like each other.
There have been the ones where people are like, one person is like, yeah, I think communication's great. And then everyone else is like, oh, it's real bad.
Yeah. I feel like that's usually the case.
And that's usually the person everyone else points to first also and says, oh my gosh, Diana freaking thinks she's communicating everywhere. But let me tell you, when I go in behind her work or her emails or her whatever, nobody knows what's going on. And so to your point, everyone says we can improve our communication.
Yeah. Yeah. So what if you're that person, which is what we're going to talk about today? What if you're the person who maybe you're like, okay, yeah, like I think I'm pretty good at communication, but if you're really honest with yourself, sometimes it's not landing, or you've communicated something and then like the team didn't do what you thought they were going to do after you said that thing or did the meeting, or you thought you'd just given the pep talk and now people are more upset, or just like it didn't make the change you thought it would, or even like the opposite happened. I think that's what we want to talk about today is like, what if you aren't as successful as you hoped you would be in communication? And we're going to talk about maybe some of the common causes we see that communication does not land effectively, because I think this is something, you know, I know we kind of pointed out there's that person, but if we're honest, all of us run into this. And I think I've already run into this today, where it's like you say something and then somebody asks a question and you're like, oh, no, that's not what I meant at all, or what I was meaning to say. So I think we all run into this where like, no matter how maybe confident we are or well-spoken we are, sometimes your communication just doesn't land. And we see some common causes why. So we're going to dive into that today. So I'm just going to open up the floor for our team. We talked about this a little bit before we jumped on and have a little list of some common ones. But I'm curious for Diana and Philip for you to jump in, or like, what are the really hot or common ones that you see, and tell us about it.
Yeah, I also want to echo that, like, not everyone is good at communicating with everyone else, right? I might be all of my quirks might fit very well with Stephanie, and her and I communicate well, but then when I do that same thing with Philip, it doesn't land.
Well, it's because we're both really funny. And so
funny. Oh, Philip's heart. I just watched his heart die. He was like,
I didn't mean to imply that Philip wasn't funny. I just think Diana and I
we know what you meant. That plane landed. And guess what? My ship is about to sail. Let's add as many metaphors to this as we can. I have a story. I have an opinion. I'm going to talk really fast and make no sense and then just ghost. That's how I'm going to communicate.
And this is when then Stephanie has to go to either Bethany or Diana and be like, I think I pissed off Philip. I think I did it today. I think I pushed him over the edge.
No, I think you're hilarious. I think both of you are just funny people. I think our team is very funny, and I was a little overreacting for the fun of this podcast, right? But also, it would hurt so bad. You know, there was a little kid once that told me my joke wasn't funny, and I don't know if this is a story, this is an example of what not to do, but when a little kid looks at you and judges you, and I would think it was a church situation, I was just, making a dad joke. I don't know. I thought it was hilarious. All of the over 25-year-olds were laughing. And this little kid just stared at me and was like, that's not very funny. And that hurt. Apparently, that is my Achilles heel. Okay. Let's see if we edit this out. I'm going to mute now.
So, all that to say, yeah, I do think that one of the things that don't land in communication is when you overuse humor, or you're trying to overuse humor. And like Philip was also pointing out, the over metaphoring it, like so much, we're a ship or we're a building or we're a, and sometimes all of that gets a little lost in communication. I also will say I used a metaphor one time with a person who was not from the US. She was Ukrainian. And I said, a bird in the hand. And she was like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. And she was like, what are you talking about? And thankfully we had a good enough relationship that she could call me out. But if we didn't, and I just used that, what is that? Is that a metaphor? A simile? Whatever it is. Colloquialism. That's what I'm going to call it. If I had just used that and she didn't ask me the question, she would have left and been like, what is she talking about? Birds and bushes. What's going on? So I think there's a lot to the keeping things direct. Storytelling is really effective if you do it well. Metaphors are really effective if you do it appropriately. Humor is really effective if you do it appropriately. But there's a fine line there, all of those things.
I totally agree. As you're talking, I was thinking of a leader I worked under once who, again, was a very funny person, genuinely. We'll give him that. It was very funny. But oftentimes we'd show up to a meeting to talk about something and he'd kind of get a little initial laugh. And then it was like, he kind of just kept going. And then almost everything was a joke, or he'd get off on a tangent and it would almost became his stand-up show instead of this. And I would sometimes leave those meetings thinking, well, I know now all the jokes you could make about that, or I know what you think is funny about launching this new location or initiative. But I still don't really understand the tactics, what you're going to do versus what I'm going to do. And it was hard because then I would leave and I'd end up with a very different looking to-do list than other people on the team, and would come to find out sometimes we were either duplicating work or there were huge gaps in what was or wasn't getting done because too much of the communication was focused on the humor, or somebody would get off on a tangent and tell this story. And then, oh my God, okay, well, I'm sorry, I've got a hard stop and I've got to go. And then we didn't really talk about what we needed to talk about. So I agree with what you're saying, Diana. It's humor and stories and all of those things can be really effective, but you have to know when to place them and honestly, like kind of when to dial it down too. And I think a lot of us get nervous when we're communicating. And so we'll just start talking too much. And just, try to keep it a little more on topic and on focus. And this is where I'm going to say something that some of you will be like, that's the most consultancy thing, but like, what does your meeting agenda look like? And do you have an agenda? And did you decide what you were going to talk about in advance? Because if you're someone who tends to go on rabbit trails or get off topic, the agenda is really good, because then either you or you can like phone a friend and have somebody else on the team be like, okay, I'm going to pull us back to then this point and this thing we were going to talk about, because this is really important. And we only have 20 more minutes in this meeting to chat about this. So, okay. Well, what else?
I appreciate what you shared. And I think for our own team, being transparent, even in this quarter two of 2026, we were talking about our own team and how our own meetings internally with each other, we consulted ourselves and said, with a split hybrid team, virtual, sometimes the main time we all are together, because we're not all in person, is a group meeting. And so we have, I think, some built-in times where it's understood we catch up on our first meetings of the week and whatnot. But we've started doing that in every meeting of every day of the week. And so internal team members are great to say, hey, this is an area we can change, we can do differently, to really help our time go farther and to really stick to the point. And so I think for us, even internally, we know each other pretty well as a team. And so we are good to raise our hands as facilitators, and remind ourselves, let's do that then. Let's play that role for ourselves again. To like, hey, great point, Philip, and you're not very funny. And so nicer words, but not monologue time. Your stand-up improv class, do that later. Today, hey, Philip, can you remind me the nicer way? Hey, Philip, so hilarious. About the project we're talking about, can we, pull them back in, right? And so I have a question for you all. I wonder, what is the tell? Because I think sometimes it's really easy in these situations. You can tell when someone's communication isn't landing. It happened just yesterday in a call. And so afterward, I was talking with the leader, and it was like their mind was blown when I said, what this team was asking for was this very specific thing. And you were giving a really good solution, but you were missing those 3 inferred meanings in between. And her light bulb went on, and she realized, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I missed. And so how did I not see the plane wasn't landing? Or she kind of could tell they weren't meeting, or the plane wasn't landing, but she was having a hard time figuring out why. So what would be our advice to unpack that? If you're a leader, if you're a team member in the room and the plane isn't landing and you can tell it's not landing, but you don't know why it's not landing, what's a tip or trick we could give people to unpack why it's not landing?
I mean, I think a lot of times it's like watching the body language in the room, right? Of like, yeah, if you say something and then people are kind of like looking around to each other or looking up and down, or all of a sudden people like pull out their phones and are like trying to look, you might have just said something that was either different, unexpected, or people don't know what you were talking about. So I think those are some cues to watch, that like maybe it's not landing. I mean, the other is like just observing people multitasking during a meeting. Like if laptops are open and everyone's like this and they're not making consistent eye contact with you, they might actually just be doing other things during the meeting, which, might not be all about your communication, but it might mean that like, okay, there's other more important things that they've prioritized today. So are we having the right meeting right now? Or honestly, do we need to like refocus the team and pull them back in some way?
I use the old facilitator's trick. When I think I've lost someone, I say or a group, I'll say something like, based on all of that, what do you think we should do next? Or what are the next steps, everybody, right? Like, I think you can ask the question. And when you do that, you get very clear on, are people understanding what you're saying, or are they still very confused? Because you'll get the question of like, or you'll get the answer of, oh, I think we should do this next. Or you'll start getting some questions like, well, what did you mean by this? Or I'm not really sure what you want from us, or what, whatever that is.
But I think if you ask the question and put it out there, it'll reveal itself on if it's clear or not.
Yeah, I really like that. I'll say for my communication, I know I'm someone who can tend to monologue. I love to talk. I'm a professional yapper. I could talk all day. I could talk to a rock, right? Like I could do a whole Dr. Seuss book about everything I could talk to. So I know like my tendency is to just like explain something and then keep moving and keep moving and keep going because I want to accomplish a lot and I want to get a lot done in this meeting or in this conversation. And so kind of to Diana's point, something that I've learned and a tool I'll say is like before I launch into explaining something, I'll say, would it be helpful if I explained this more, or is everybody with me? Everybody understands, we're kind of on the same page, or who has a question before we keep going? And that will help because then sometimes we'll be like, yeah, to be honest, like I am lost, or I must have missed something because I don't understand this. Or some people like, nope, we're with you. Just like keep moving. So that's a tip I would use, like, especially if you're trying to explain something or talk through a strategy or get into details on something, as to like, before you keep diving deeper, like do a gut check and make sure everybody's still with you. Yeah.
I love those tips. One I might add to it for me, this is myself maybe, the speed at which I speak. I think sometimes I am just so rapid fire and there's so many ideas that I can ask 3 questions and it is not clear. Which one do you speak of now? And so I think some leaders I've also coached and worked with, Stephanie, you made this point, you know, I think sometimes if you're rapid firing so much, you're the professional speaker on and off a stage. You may have never have been given a stage. You're just a professional speaker. Speak and talk and tell him, giving that space and just making the one question really, really clear, which Diana's example does. Everybody pause. What is missing? What should we do next? Really, really simple. And not peppering so many options. Because I think I've seen leaders on teams where they're almost there, but then you lose the moment because they pepper in 25 additional questions. Some are really important. Some are important later. So you're saying right now, let's talk about X, and then we can talk about Y.
Yeah. And I think this leans into almost another one we talked about, was like, you're almost too direct or too short or too brief in your communication. That sometimes I'll see leaders, they attempt that questioning, but then they'll be like, anybody got any questions? Good. And it is like, to me, feels like not even a full second pause, or maybe you just gave it a second. But if you just unpacked a lot of new information, people need more than a second to maybe think of a question. And so, but I also know, like, we as Americans especially are very uncomfortable with pauses in communication and silence. And so sometimes I will even like ramp everybody up to that moment to say, okay, I have 2 more points I want to cover, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. And so that way I give maybe people who are more processors like a time to think and start getting ready that I'm going to ask a question or leave space for questions. And then when I say, okay, does anyone have a question or anything to add? Pause and at least count to 10 in your head. And it's going to feel like an eternity, but just try it and actually leave a moment for someone to raise their hand. Because I can't tell you how many times I've been in a meeting, and whether it's in person or virtual, and a leader will go, okay, who has a question? And somebody is about to unmute, or they go, like they're about to like start talking, or they start to raise their hand. And then the leader's like, okay, great. And just moves on. And then those people don't raise their hand again at the end, or don't bring the question back up. So don't move too quickly through it. And I think like we have sometimes seen leaders be like too direct in communication, that they're like, well, I don't want to waste anybody's time. And so I'm just going to send this really short email, or I'm going to say, hey, this is a 5-minute update. And they just give the 2 bullet points. And while sometimes that's really great, sometimes you may have just created more confusion than you did clarity because you left out a lot of detail or context that might have helped the team. So it is that hard balance of knowing, like, when do you need to share more? When do you need to share less? Which is why this is really, really hard. But I think what I'm hearing our team say, which I think is a good tip, is like, leave space for people to ask questions, because people are generally pretty nice about this kind of thing and will be honest with you and tell you if they need more from you, right? So I think it's always good to build in that pause. Philip, as we were preparing for this, you brought one idea to us that I thought was really interesting, about using corporate jargon when you speak. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, there's a longitudinal research study done by certain universities and institutions that basically said that words, corporate speak, jargon, lexicons, semantics can cause confusion. Basically, this research study said a lot of corporate BS muddies the waters and causes a lack of work. So the way I introduced this, even a bunch of gobbledygook words to say, keep your words clear and direct. That shows that you're competent and can be much more effective. The end results of the studies showed that people who ranked really high on, essentially they called it their BS barometer. So people who use a lot of fancy words to try and sound smart, or maybe try to buffer ideas where there's not a lot of substance, those people are not considered as great of a leader or a team member, and clearly are not communicating well with their teams. So they're less productive, less efficient, and less in every way. So we looked at it as a team to essentially say, oh my gosh, how much of our own corporate jargon do we see and experience on different teams? And I think we talked amongst ourselves. We have different leaders we've seen who are incredibly intelligent and competent, but are really good at knowing their audience, because it's not a bad thing to use great words. I love words, but it isn't helpful if your words are distracting and causing confusion.
Yeah, you have to stay in trajectory and alignment with all of our ethos and the mission to be sure we accomplish the Q1 objectives and synthesize all of this information so we can circle back.
What?
Right?
No.
Great visionary insights. Kudos to you. I'm going to slack you a Teams concordance about the success with which you just mentioned.
I hate
Yeah.
it. Can you just talk to me like I'm an actual human?
Right. It almost like feels like sci-fi, like a robot is speaking.
It does.
To you. You're like, I don't understand what you just said. And obviously, we're poking fun a little bit, but it is like, we were talking in preparation for this. We've all been in the meeting where somebody uses just a lot of corporate jargon, and like, well, can you show us the ROI on the Q2 and the this versus the last fiscal year? And like, I think, like what Philip was saying, this research study that was done actually showed that the people who then are kind of like falling for the corporate jargony speech are actually then the workers who accomplish less, because it wasn't actually clear what you wanted them to do. So yeah, like, just speak clearly to people. And I get it. Like, sometimes we get nervous in a meeting, and honestly, maybe you're in a workplace culture where like that type of jargon is just used and you have a million acronyms and you're like, well, we need to do an S bar and we need to do rounding and like, yeah, I get it. We get it. There's real corporate jargon and company language, but be careful not to do too much of that. Or if you're noticing your communication isn't landing, or the team didn't do what you thought they were going to do after that meeting or after you said it, you might reevaluate and be like, yeah, am I using too much corporate speak? Did I use maybe acronyms the team didn't know about? Am I kind of trying to sound smart here instead of just like saying directly, like, team, last 3 months numbers didn't look good. We've got to improve. Here's the 2 things I'm looking at when I look at our numbers. This is why they're important to our team and the success. And so who has an idea for how we could do it differently this month?
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think, like, if you're in the environment where all of that jargon is really used, then if there's a new person or a new meeting or something, just take a minute to make sure everyone understands. Because I think that's where it gets lost, is like a new person will join the team and you're still saying things like, I don't know, I can't think of anything right now, but you know what I mean? You're still using all the jargon and this. We're really bad about engagement and Gallup and like all of those words that we know very, very top to bottom, bottom to front, toxicity, right? We know all those words, but a new person won't, or they'll have their own connotation of what those mean, not what it actually means to us. So I think just pausing and being like, hey, when our team talks about toxicity, we're talking about misalignment. Here's what that looks like. And just pausing for a moment for the new people to make sure that they're not lost and that everyone's on the same page, because words all do carry different meanings for everybody. I know we all sort of think that this word that I'm saying means the same to everybody, but it doesn't. Any word I put out there does not mean the same to everybody. And I think that we forget that as part of communication. And that context is super helpful if you can just describe or define the jargon.
Totally.
Yeah.
And when you're saying that, it also made me think of another one of like, sometimes people will like over research or over data, but then you kind of missed the main point. So it's like we get into the weeds really fast in something and we're looking at the numbers or we're looking at the data. And then like, I feel like usually I'm the person then in the meeting that's like, I'm sorry, what are we solving for here? Like, what are we trying to do? Because like, yeah, we could look at every line of data here. We could go through the entire spreadsheet, but like, to what end? And so I would say like, yeah, if that's another thing of where like, if you've handed out, especially if it's something on paper and you see people just like flipping as you're talking, or they're not even opening it, you might have missed communicating what the point of looking at this was. I'll say one of the moments I see is the most is during board meetings. So if you have a board or have been on a board and the quarterly financials get put in front of everyone, and I will either usually observe one of two things. Either there's people who are like furiously flipping as they're talking, trying to figure out like what the heck we're talking about and which page we're on and why this matters. Or you have people who just like haven't even opened the packet and really maybe don't even understand why we're looking at the financials right now or why we're doing X, Y, and Z. So be careful not to jump into the weeds or to put too much research in front of people, because I think most people's tendency, honestly, is if you put information in front of them, they're going to try to read it. And if people are reading while you're talking, they are not able to like read and listen at the same time. They're missing pieces, and usually they miss a little bit of both. We are not multitaskers. That's not how our human brains work. So I think be careful not to like over data, over analyze, over share. If you're someone who feels like, yeah, my communication's not landing and you are coming with packets and files of information, or you sent everyone 8 attachments before the meeting, you might be overdoing it a little bit.
You might be overdoing it. That's a tough one. Yeah.
Danny, you brought up one that I wanted you to talk about, and it was the leader who tries to be like too cool or be the friend in the meeting. And like, why doesn't that work?
Yeah. I think anytime you are at work and you're trying to be too much of a friend, it will fail, whether that's with your coworkers, whether that's you're a leader. Because here's the thing, I really love my coworkers, but I still have to work with them, right? I cannot be fully Diana, fully friends. There's still a level of we have to get things done together.
Yeah.
And so I've seen where you go into a meeting and you're like, hey, you guys know what your job is. I'm just going to show you this thing. We'll check back later. No one knows what you want from them. No one understands what that was for. People want to go to work, do good work, and have good expectations set for them. And without those expectations, they can't do good work. So then it leads to all of this frustration of just like, well, I don't know what you want from me. Or I've seen a leader leave a meeting after doing exactly that, being like, you guys are all pros, great job, great job. And then leave a meeting and be like, they're not going to do what I want them to do. Well, sir, that's because you didn't tell them what you want from them, right?
Yeah.
And so I think anytime you're overly chill or too hands off or not checking in or not setting a clear expectation, you're doing everyone around you a disservice, even your coworkers, right? Stephanie, if you and I are working on a project and you expect me to do something, but you never actually say that to me, and I don't know what you want from me. I may be doing 10 other things that I think are really good, but you're like frustrated with me because I haven't done the thing you wanted me to do.
Yeah.
So I feel like I sound like a jerk when I am like, you can't be friends with people at work. That's not what I'm saying. Be friendly, be kind, be open, be caring, be empathetic, but be clear about what you need. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree with all of that. It made me think of a meeting I sat in not long ago where kind of the key leader had to step out of the company for like a family emergency. And, me sitting in the room as the consultant, I was like, okay, team, like, what do we need to talk about while this person is out and who's covering what? And there's one other leader on the team that they very much are like the cool boss and they're chill. And they were kind of like literally said on the call, like, well, like, I just don't think we need to worry about any of this. Like, we just have an amazing team and you all know what you're supposed to be doing. And I'm just going to get out of your way and everybody's just going to do it. And like, I think we're just going to be fine. And this person doesn't even need to be worried about it. And they know they don't need to be worried about it. And like, some people were nodding along while they spoke and other people were starting to look a little deer in the headlights. And I'll admit, like, I was sitting there thinking like, but we haven't actually talked about who's covering this person's job responsibilities while there's out. Like, there's things this person does that nobody else on the team does normally. So who's picking up this task or that task? Or are we just saying that's just going to be a huge pile of emails or paperwork for them to come back to after having to step away for this really significantly challenging life moment? And so I think, I think the intent that leader had was to like pay the team a compliment and to say, team, like, I'm not scared. I'm not afraid. I'm not worried. I trust you all. But I think you can communicate all of that and then still talk through the tactics to say like, okay, Diana, Stephanie would normally do this. She's out right now for a family emergency. Could you pick up this task while she's gone? Philip, could you do this? Bethany, could you take that? And then also say, I trust all of you. And if you see something else, I trust you and I trust what you're going to do. You don't have to run everything by me, but let's make sure these 3 core things that Stephanie normally does are going to get covered while she's out.
Yeah. A past leader I had used to say all the time, like, trust and verify, right? Like, I can trust you to do all of the things. I absolutely do. But there's nothing wrong with verifying that they're getting done, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with asking the question and being like, hey, are you going to take care of that or do you need me to? Right? That clarity, that verification, that just like one extra step after trust isn't a bad thing. I trust Stephanie to do anything really, but I do often go to her and be like, hey, did that get taken care of or do you need me to take care of it? Like, and she'll be like, no, I got it. No big deal. And she'll do the same with me. Like, hey, you saw you were on that email. Did you take care of it? Yeah, got it. No problem.
Yep.
And we trust each other implicitly to get the job done. Stephanie's never not gotten the job done, but she's still just that extra piece of communication to make sure that her and I are on the same page.
Yeah. Well, and it's just like we're all humans and we all forget things and miss things sometimes. So I like the trust, but verifier. The common one I'll hear is the leader is just like one step short of getting the team there. So they'll say, okay, what are we going to do? And they talk about the what we're going to do, how we're going to tackle this problem, but they miss the step of then saying, okay, who is going to do that? I was literally in a meeting this morning where a team was talking about this stuff they needed to do that was important to the business. And they talked through the tactics and the steps they would take to do it. And I was like, and who else on the team needed to be involved? But they were about to move on. And in my mind, I thought, well, we didn't say who in this room or on this Zoom right now is going to go ask those questions or talk to that other person. And so sometimes this is the role we'll play as the facilitator. I was like, okay, wait, hold on. Before we move on, who's going to talk to Diana about this? We talked about how we'll need Diana's help for this. Who can go ask Diana that question later today? And then somebody was like, oh, I got it. Great. Let's keep going. So don't forget that last little step in like that, because that can be why sometimes something didn't happen, as you might have talked about the what and the how, but not the who.
I call that the royal we. We are going to talk to Diana later. Well, we aren't. If it's a we, no one's doing it. You need an I. You need an I. The royal we does not work at work.
Yep. Yeah, my dad always used to say this way growing up. We'd be like, well, we this, we that. And he'd be like, you got a mouse in your pocket?
I have weirdly picked that up from you. I didn't realize until just now that it was you that I have picked this up from. But I do say that. Like I'll say it to my husband all the time. He'll be like, we should do this. And I'm like, you got a mouse in your pocket?
You got a mouse in your pocket? Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, you can thank Steve for that.
I love it. I will. Thank you.
It was like all the time. We'd be like, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Or a lot of times when I was a kid, it was because I was trying to like deflect some blame.
Totally.
Well, we didn't know. And he's like, you got a mouse in your pocket? Because I knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I knew that's what you were supposed to do.
Yep. Well, and teams do it all the time. Teams do it all the time. Like, we're going to get this project done. Who is we? Who's going to do, like, we're going to fix this spreadsheet. Great. Who is we? Tell me who exactly is responsible for this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, this has been fun to talk about for me, fun. I would say, of like, because again, it's stuff we hear, but it's easy misses. And I would say that's probably my final thought. I'm curious to hear if you all have any final thoughts, because it can be really tricky sometimes to not know why your communication didn't land. Like we can all generally feel it of like, ooh, that didn't go how I thought, or wow, that's not what I thought they were going to do, or that's not the outcome I wanted. But it can be hard to pinpoint why it didn't work. And yes, there's always that other margin of error of the person wasn't listening, or they just decided to do it differently. But I think if we're going to be humble leaders who are willing to grow on this call, it's like, okay, like do a little self-evaluation here. Is there something you could have done that would have made this communication more effective? And did you accidentally slip into one of these things we've talked about and kind of miss it? So the plane didn't land. You circled, but you didn't land.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think the landing part is, we always talk about communication, right? And when we talk about communication, people generally think about how they're putting things out there. What are they saying? What are they doing? And we talked a lot about that. We talked a lot about the like, what are you saying? What are you doing? But the second part of communication is the receiver. Are they actually getting it? Are they actually contextualizing it? Are they actually understanding it? And are they actually knowing what you want from them?
Yeah.
And so that second part of communication is the like we're saying, the landing. So if it's not landing, review why. Like, and all of these reasons could be it could be 100 other reasons, but these are just like really common reasons that things aren't landing. And then the other part that's really hard is you can communicate one way with one person and use you could do all of these mistakes with one person, and they're going to walk away and be totally fine. But if you did it with the next person, it's not going to be fine, because that communication is two-way and everybody receives things differently. And so I think you have to remember that you might have to adjust your communication based on who you're talking to and the setting you're in. And good communicators do that often and check in often and reevaluate who they're communicating to and how they're doing that, so that that person or that group is actually receiving the information.
Yeah. Gosh, that's really, really well said. And I'll just call it, Philip had to jump off early a little bit, but I appreciate you saying that in, Diana, because I would, even though Philip was on here, he and I would probably talk about how differently we communicate. If this is not your first time listening to the podcast, Philip and I are very distinct communicators, but we work really, really well together. And I think it's because we both, number one, are aware of what you just said, Diana. We know some of those things, but we also like take the time to ensure we've heard each other. Like I can remember, and I'll just tell one quick story before we wrap, but there was one time Philip had felt like he had asked me to do something and I did not feel like he had asked me to do something. So
it happens.
Philip was like, oh yeah, the client would like it if you took this survey for them. And in my mind, I heard they'd like it if you did this as optional.
Yep.
They'd like it. Like, this is something internal they use. They'd like it if you took a look at it. And in my mind, my brain instantly cataloged that as optional.
Yeah.
And then Philip came back to me a week later and he's like, I'm getting emails from the client saying you didn't do that. You did that. You did that, right?
Yep.
And I was like, no.
And he was like, but I asked you to do it. And we broke it down and talked about it. And I said, oh, Philip, I think when I heard, because he said that phrase again, he said, well, I told you they'd like you to do it. And I said, I think I'm hearing it. And when you say that, my brain heard optional. When you said it, it was no, they would like for you to do this. Like it was do it and do it now. We want you to do it. We need you to do it. And so, I know, again, Philip had to jump a little early, but I think that's a really key thing you said there at the end, Diana, which is like, you have to be aware. We all live in our own brains and we all have different styles, and great communicators take the time to think about not only what they're saying, but who they're communicating to, how it could be received. They double check for meaning. They pause to let people ask questions. Because even in that instance, right, I'm not pointing the finger at Philip. I'll point it right at myself. I could have paused and been like, wait a second. When you say they like for us to do that, is this optional or do I need to do this? And when do you want me to do it by? Yeah. Communication's hard. I think we say that really often. It's really difficult. And most people think they're good at it, and I think that's also hard, is like, you have to recognize that you're not good at communication every time. You're just not.
Yep.
Because you're not talking to the same person every time.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
Well, this has been a fun topic for our team to talk about. So we hope you enjoyed it as well. And if you have things you would add, send those our way. Maybe we'll do a 2.0 after we get your feedback of other ways you've heard communication misses, or where are you struggling. So send those to us. Listen to the outro for how to get a hold of us. And thanks for listening again today.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.